The Liberal government has just released its latest budget, and facing a cost of living crisis and a possible recession, it plans to go deeper into the red and double down on what it sees as the economy of the future.
In what is the most significant economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution, our friends and partners around the world, chief among them the United States, are investing heavily to build clean economies and the net zero industries of tomorrow.
This government wants Canada not just part of that race, but leading it. The Liberals plan to spend $21 billion over the next 5 years on growing the clean economy and expect to accelerate that to $80 billion by 2034. Most of that is through a series of green tax credits. There are some measures to address affordability. The big one is dental care, something sought by the NDP. It will start to be rolled out this year and will affect as many as 9 million uninsured Canadians. Also, the Liberals are offering what they call a grocery rebate. That's on top of the GST tax credit for lower-income Canadians. A single eligible Canadian will get an additional check worth up to $234. An eligible senior will get $225. So where does that leave Canada's fiscal position? It's worse off. The Liberals are expecting bigger deficits every year for the next 5 years when compared to last fall's economic statement. And that path back to a balanced budget, well, that's gone. Meanwhile, the outlook for Canada's economy has turned gloomier since the fall, and the odds of a painful downturn are potentially higher. All of that is a lot for Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, who joins me now. Ms. Freeland, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, David.
There's $21 billion here over the next 5 years for green transition, mostly in tax credits. It's a lot of money, but given the stakes, the inflection point you've talked about, and the need to capitalize on this opportunity, I wonder if it's enough compared to the scale of what Joe Biden has put on the table in the Inflation Reduction Act.
Well, I think that it is. And you have to remember it comes on top of tax credits that we put forward in previous budgets. It comes on top of our price on pollution. It comes on top of entities that we have that lend money at good terms to clean finance companies, so like the Canada Growth Fund, the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So I think when you take everything together, the Canadian package is absolutely competitive with the US package. I think this is an investment that we're going to look back on and say this launched the Canadian economy for the 21st century.
Your officials in the briefings earlier today said you need $100 billion in global capital every year to make this work. I mean, when you look at $20 billion over 5 years in tax incentives, do you think you can get to the level that you get $100 billion every year investing into the clean economy transition?
I think that we can get our fair share. I think we can get more than our fair share because, again, David, we've made a major investment this year, but it is part of a much bigger package. So yeah, I think we can get there. And the one other thing I would mention, because investors say this to me, what does Canada have to offer in this global race? We have these incentives, we have our government policy, we have natural resources, like nature has given us such an advantage. And we have Canadians. You know, I was talking to a Canadian car part producer who said absenteeism at the US plants that this person runs was 25%. In Canada, it's 8 or 9%. So we have all these advantages. I think we're going to get there.
But I know when you met with the provincial finance ministers earlier this year, you delivered the message that you can't meet this challenge alone. So is the $21 billion over 5 years, $80 billion by 2034, is that everything you needed to do or everything you were able to do to meet this moment?
Well, when I said can't meet it alone, thank you for remembering that, because message to provinces, you guys have a strong fiscal position right now. The federal government supported you a lot on healthcare. We supported you a lot during COVID. And when it comes to supporting investments in the clean economy, provinces are going to need to be at the table too. And I'm confident they will be.
So is there anything you weren't able to do on this particular front? I know one of the issues, things in the subsidies is that the higher the wages you pay, the prevailing wage, which is adopting something right out of Joe Biden's plan in the United States, tied to union wages plus pension benefits and other benefits. The closer you are to that, the larger the subsidy you will get. Is there anything you weren't able to put in this package because of the fiscal reality you're facing with the slump in the economy?
To be honest, David, I am very happy with where we've landed on our clean energy plan. And, you know, when you talk about the weakening of the economy, yeah, that's happening, but it's not a surprise. And actually, it's on purpose, right? The Bank of Canada has raised interest rates very high, very quickly, because it wanted to slow down the economy. And in this budget, we're saying it's a budget for today, but it's also a budget seeing past this slowdown and saying we need to put in place the conditions to build the economy to have great middle-class jobs.
The slowing economy, the hike in interest rates, all of that has created an affordability challenge. You have the grocery rebate in this budget, which seems to be the centerpiece. It's like a double up extra GST rebate for people. But in big initiatives, that seems to be the extent of it. There's some smaller efforts on reducing credit card fees, for processing fees for small and medium-sized businesses. Have you done enough here to help people? For example, the $500 rental subsidy, not renewed in this budget.
So first of all, the grocery rebate, thank you for mentioning it. And I want to say to Canadians, especially low-income Canadians, do file your taxes. Because one of the things that we have found is there are a lot of people who are eligible for these benefits who don't file their tax returns. And that's an element in this budget, is we are moving towards automatic tax filing. That's designed to make sure if you're a low-income Canadian, you are in the system and you actually can get the money that you deserve. So that's an important element. The other thing I want to mention that kicks in this spring that is going to help particularly low-income Canadians is we announced in the fall we're going to expand the Canada Worker Benefit. And that means that it's going to cover now around 4 million Canadians. These are low-income people, people working in grocery stores, people working in retail. We all discovered during COVID how essential their jobs are, and they don't get paid very much money. This is a benefit that's going to help them.
But why is the rental subsidy gone? $500 to help people deal with, if interest rates are up, you know, property owners are still going to pass that along to their tenants. That's been eliminated. Why?
In this budget, we worked very hard to find a balance. On the one hand, to make the absolutely essential investments Canadians need, investments in affordability, investments in health care, including dental care, investments in the clean economy, but at the same time, to do it in a fiscally responsible way. And I am really confident we found that balance, but does it mean we've done every single thing anyone would like? No, of course not. You know, to govern is to choose, and we've had to make some choices.
You talk about fiscal responsibility. The deficit projections are up in every single year of the forecast now because of the extra spending and because of the declining economic picture. The amount we're going to spend every year servicing the debt is going to double from a couple of years ago of $25 billion to $50 billion. When you look at $50 billion a year lost now to debt servicing, you look at ongoing deficits, the surplus plan for 2027, 2028 is now gone as a deficit of $14 billion. How does that meet restraint? How does that meet fiscal responsibility as a standard for you?
Well, let me say two ways. The chart you just showed was a really good chart because what it shows is the deficit is coming down year after year after year. We have a deficit coming down percentage-wise from 1.5 to 1.4% this year, dollar-wise from $45 billion last year to $40 billion this year. And in each of those years, as your chart shows, coming down, coming down, coming down. That's restraint, that's responsibility. The other measure that I think is really important to bear in mind is comparing us to the rest of the world. And as we prepared this budget, I looked at what was happening in the rest of the world. In the G7, Canada has the very lowest deficit, the very lowest debt to GDP ratio. And then we looked at, let's compare Canada to other AAA rated countries. We have a lower deficit than Australia, a lower deficit than the Netherlands. So I think we are in a good place. I think we have made the necessary investments, because not to do that is a form of recklessness also. And yet we have done it in a fiscally responsible
But we have a
way.
higher deficit now, or projection, than we had in November, which shows that change. The economic forecast that is the underpinning of this budget was done in January before we've seen the challenges in the banking sector. So it's probably a bit more optimistic than it would be were it done today. You're making this big bet on the clean transition. You've locked in a lot of money for healthcare and for dental care. And now you have increasing debt and a slowing economy. I mean, how worried are you that we're going to end up in a recession or a prolonged economic slowdown later this year, and you're not going to have the fiscal room to deal with it?
So just to be a little bit detail-oriented,
Go right ahead.
the economic forecast was, the final one was done in February. And it's a private sector economic forecast. So just to be clear with listeners, it's not me,
But
it's
the banking
not
issues,
economists.
yes, absolutely.
So
but the
that-
banking issues are after that.
100%,
right?
100%. And look, we've presented in the budget both a downside and an upside scenario, what things would look like if things get worse, if things, if economic slowdown is more pronounced, what it would look like
That's
if
pretty bad.
it is less. Yeah, but you know what? Canada absolutely does have the fiscal firepower to deal with whatever situation we face. I'm really, really confident of that.
Okay, Deputy Prime Minister, I know a lot of people want to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.